Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we are diving into one of the most mysterious and tragic stories that still tugs at many hearts. The story of Gail Katz. Gail Katz was a young woman full of life and dreams when her world abruptly ended in the summer of 1985. Her mysterious disappearance and the subsequent events turned this case into a real detective thriller. Her family and friends never stopped searching, and detectives worked tirelessly to piece together the fragmented evidence into a coherent picture. Why did her husband Robert seem so calm? And what was he really hiding? What secrets from the past could have led to this horrifying end? And how did detectives uncover the truth decades after her disappearance? Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and click the bell icon so you don't miss any new episodes. It was Sunday, July 7th, 1985. Around 6:30 p.m., Robert Birnbaum, a plastic surgeon, arrived at his sister's house in Montclair, New Jersey, USA. The man was alone. It was his nephew's birthday, and his sister had organized a party for the child. She had invited her brother Robert and his wife Gail Katz to the party. Robert told his sister and father that Gail did not come with him because he and his wife had quarreled that day. According to Robert, Gail left their Manhattan apartment around 11 o'clock in the morning to go to Central Park, after which she was supposed to return home. But she was not home when Robert was getting ready for the party, so he went without her. On his way home from the party, Robert stopped at the house of his friend, Dr. Scott Baranoff. He was in a depressed state and called his apartment several times to talk to his wife. There was no answer. Robert told Scott that he and Gail had argued that morning, and she had run out of the house in shorts and sandals, and since then, he had not spoken to his wife. Robert returned to his Manhattan apartment the next day, but Gail was not there. He called psychologist Dr. Yvette Foss and told her about the argument. He informed Yvette that Gail had left early in the morning after the quarrel to go to Central Park and sunbathe. Yvette advised him to call the police and also ask the doorman in their residential complex if he had seen Gail. It turned out that no one had seen Gail since then. On July 8th at 9 p.m., Robert contacted a detective. Robert informed him that Gail had left their apartment at 11 o'clock the previous morning, and since then, he had neither seen her nor heard anything about her. Robert told the detective that he had waited for Gail in the apartment all day, but she never returned home. He said he left at 5:30 p.m. to attend his nephew's birthday party at his sister's house. Since Robert was the last known person to see Gail, the detective asked him to ensure he had provided all the information and details he remembered so they could find Gail. Robert said that his wife had previously attempted to commit suicide. He also told friends that he was concerned that Gail might have harmed herself. He added that her psychotherapist, Dr. C.B. Barron, had told him that Gail was suicidal. The search for Gail began. The police tried to obtain more detailed information about Gail from Robert, and a few days after he reported his wife missing, they left several messages on Robert's phone asking him to contact the police, but he only responded on July 10th. Robert called Detective O'Malley and asked him how the investigation was progressing. He agreed to meet with him in 3 days to review the details of the last day he saw Gail again. The police began to suspect that Robert knew more than he was telling. Several things worried them. On July 14th, some of Gail's friends, including her close friend, were searching for the woman, posting posters and distributing flyers around the neighborhood. But Robert was telling everyone that he thought Gail had gone on a week-long shopping spree at Bloomingdale's. Everyone thought his behavior was quite strange. Some details he provided about that day also varied depending on who Robert was talking to. He did not tell the police that he and Gail had argued on Sunday morning before she left home at 11:01 a.m. This was something he told his own family and some friends. He told the police that they had argued the evening before her disappearance. When asked what they argued about, he said it was about finances, but he claimed that everything was fine afterward and that he had prepared a romantic dinner for Gail. When they returned to their apartment on the night of July 6th, and the next morning, Gail left for Central Park at 11 a.m. The police asked him several times if he had told them everything about the events of July 7th and what he did that day. He repeatedly told them that he stayed in the apartment all day until he left for the party at 6:30 p.m. This sharply contrasted with what he told Gail's friends. He told them that he had been searching for Gail in Central Park that day, from 11 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. Additionally, he added that he found her towel and tanning oil in the park. Despite this being extremely relevant information for finding Gail, he never shared it with the police. Robert told the detective that he spoke to the doorman in their residential complex, and the doorman mentioned seeing Gail leave the building at 11 a.m. and not seeing her return. But when the police talked to the doorman, he said that he had not seen either Robert or Gail at all that day. When the detective asked Robert if he could inspect the apartment, it was July. Robert responded to this request only on September 12th and did not allow the police into the apartment until September 30th. Robert provided limited access, and the police were not allowed to check for blood or hair samples in the apartment. With growing suspicions about Robert's possible involvement in Gail's disappearance, the police gathered information about their marriage and found that it was far from perfect. Their relationship was described as toxic by those who knew them. Gail and Robert met in the early 80s when Gail was still in college, and Robert was working as a surgeon in Manhattan. The man made a great effort to impress Gail. He had a pilot's license and loved taking potential new girlfriends on short flights for dates. He impressed her. The man spoke several languages and seemed very romantic. Their relationship seemed fairy tale-like at first, but everything changed, and they began arguing more and more frequently a few months before the disappearance. Gail's sister told the police that once she saw Robert shove food into her sister's mouth in a restaurant, which greatly worried her. The police found that this was just one incident in a series of troubling events. Friends and family discovered that he controlled Gail, and the woman told a neighbor that she felt uncomfortable at home. Gail even reported one incident to the police, but nothing came of it. It was related to her claim that Robert began choking her until she lost consciousness when he caught her smoking on the balcony. Gail stayed with Robert after he agreed to see a psychiatrist, but later, the psychiatrist sent a letter warning that Robert might eventually kill her. Shortly before the day Gail was reported missing, the woman met someone and fell in love. She decided to leave Robert. The woman told a friend that she planned to tell her husband that she was leaving and wanted a divorce on July 7th. She told her friend that if Robert refused to divorce her, she would tell him that she would use the letter she received from the psychiatrist warning her of the danger he might pose and show it to her colleagues. The police believed that all circumstantial evidence pointed to Robert being responsible for Gail's disappearance. There was one problem. Gail was not found. The search for her continued, and her family and friends kept trying to find out what happened to her. During this time, Robert seemed calm. He spent a lot of time in the Hamptons, went to parties, and began dating other women. In September 1985, a woman named Roberta Karnowski moved into the building where Robert lived, and they were in a relationship for a year. During this time, no clues regarding Gail's disappearance were found, and no arrests were made. Despite this, Gail's disappearance remained an open and active investigation, and the lead detective reviewed the evidence again. He knew that Robert loved planes and was a licensed pilot, so he decided to check New Jersey Airport and some flight logs. He found out that Robert flew a plane on July 7, 1985. However, the date in Robert's flight log had been changed to the next day, July 8th. The detective was able to establish through airport records that Robert rented a plane at Caldwell Airport, New Jersey, on July 7th. He returned it at 4:30 p.m., after flying for an hour and 56 minutes. Why did Robert want to hide information about this flight? Detective Rosen believed that Robert killed Gail and dumped her body in the Atlantic Ocean. His flight time gave him enough time, but without a body, the district attorney's office felt there wasn't enough evidence to secure an arrest. 4 years after Gail's disappearance, in May 1989, remains were found on Staten Island. At that time, DNA testing was unavailable, and a radiologist compared an old chest X-ray with the remains found. He confirmed that it was Gail. The remains were given to her family, and they held a funeral service for Gail. No charges were filed. Robert moved to Las Vegas. He opened his own plastic surgery practice and continued dating new women. He was very well liked in the area. In 1996, he married Janet Challa, and they moved to North Dakota. The couple had a daughter, but while Robert continued living his life, the detective couldn't let go of the fact that Gail's disappearance remained unsolved, and he looked at the case anew. 10 years had passed. Since DNA forensics were now available, he asked Gail's family if they would consider exhuming the remains to have them tested. They agreed. DNA tests showed that the remains were not Gail's. Despite Gail's body not being found, the police and the district attorney's office believed that the evidence they had was sufficient, and Robert was arrested and charged with second-degree murder. He, of course, pleaded not guilty. The case against Robert was built entirely on circumstantial evidence. There were no eyewitnesses, no forensic samples, no confession, no body. Nothing was found. Despite this, the prosecution argued that, although the evidence was circumstantial, it clearly pointed to one suspect. Robert killed Gail in their apartment when he found out she was leaving him. The police believed he spent hours dismembering her body before flying the plane over the ocean and dumping it between Montauk Point, New York, and Cape May, New Jersey. The prosecution had to prove to the jury that Robert could physically dump the body during the flight. They believed he acted alone. To show that it was possible, they called 4 expert witnesses to testify and prepared a video demonstrating how a person could do this. The jury heard from 4 expert witnesses: the chief medical examiner of New York, an experienced pilot from the NYPD, an aviation safety inspector, and a flight instructor and test flight examiner. They testified that Robert, a surgeon and pilot, could physically dismember Gail's body in just 10 minutes, pack the dismembered limbs into a flight bag, and carry them through the uncontrolled back exit of his apartment building and walk 2 blocks to his car. The jury heard that Robert could load the flight bag into the plane without attracting attention. Additionally, the court heard that the plane he rented was relatively easy to operate, and Robert had no obstacles in carrying out his plan. The prosecution provided the jury with evidence of motive. The jury heard about Gail's affair and her plans to leave Robert. She was making plans. She had borrowed money. Gail was determined to leave her husband. On that day, July 7th, the court heard that Robert didn't tell anyone, not even his own family, that he flew a plane on July 7th. The jury was shown the altered flight log, which made it seem like Robert flew the next day. The court heard about their toxic relationship and allegations of domestic violence. Robert had previously described their fights as serious and explosive. The court heard that he had also mentioned his hatred for Gail in the past and had referred to wanting to kill her. The court heard about direct threats made towards his wife. In the fall of 1983, Gail called her cousin and said that she and Robert had argued. She confessed that he had choked her, and that it wasn't the first time he had done it, but it was the first time she had lost consciousness. On another occasion, Gail and Robert were watching a TV show about the Von Bülow murder case, and Robert said that the problem with Claus was that he left evidence, but he wouldn't leave evidence in any case. The court heard testimony from Gail's psychotherapist. Robert told Gail's friends right after she disappeared, and her psychotherapist told him that Gail had suicidal thoughts. But the doctor testified and told the jury that she never discussed anything like that with Robert, and she didn't believe Gail had suicidal thoughts. The defense insisted that Robert was an innocent man. They argued that Gail had mental health issues, substance abuse problems, that she was seeing other men, and was unstable. They called a witness to testify. The witness told the court that he saw Gail in a bagel shop a few days after she disappeared. But the prosecution pointed out to the jury that the description of the woman he provided did not match Gail's description. The jury deliberated for 5.5 hours. They found Robert guilty of second-degree murder. He was sentenced to 20 years to life imprisonment. He appealed, but unsuccessfully. After serving 20 years of his sentence, at a parole board hearing in 2020, Robert confessed to Gail's murder for the first time and admitted that he dumped her body from the plane. The theory of what happened to Gail was accurate. The parole board heard that Robert and Gail had argued, and he wanted her to stop yelling at him, so he attacked her and strangled her. Then he flew the plane and dumped her body over the ocean. When asked why he killed Gail, he told the parole board that he was immature and didn't know how to deal with his anger. Gail's body was never found. Thank you for watching. Next time, we'll have something even more interesting for you. So subscribe and stay tuned for updates.